All right, it is now 12:05, so we're going to get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our advocacy call, our last Zoom call of the summer. Thank y'all for being here. It has been a journey, and we have made it to the end. I'm excited. So today's advocacy call, the reason we have this call is because this week is Community Engagement Week. So we're focusing on teaching you all about how to engage in your community in a different way now that we're doing this quarantine life. And so I hope you all have been doing your community service hours and engaging in conversations with your family. But today we have a really cool situation set up. We have some heavy hitters here today, and they're going to talk to us about what advocacy is to them, how they utilize it in their everyday life and on their jobs. And we have two lovely women here. Miss Amber Overton, she works at Nestle Purina as a diversity and inclusion specialist. And then we have Miss Carissa Anderson at the Scholarship Foundation, who is the advocacy director. So we're going to sit back and have a conversation with them about just what advocacy is to them and how they utilize it in their lives and on their jobs. And Amber, you can start us off.
I've been in way too many Zoom calls to still be forgetting to unmute. Hi, everybody. My name is Amber Overton, and I am the Diversity and Inclusion Specialist for Nestle Purina headquarters here in St. Louis. So this is actually a fairly new role for me. I started in January of this year. Prior to that, I worked in college access, nonprofit management, and I am an alumna of the program that Carissa will talk to you guys a little bit more about in a while. I participated in, she's gonna kill me for calling it the old name, but I'm still not used to the new one, Active Advocacy Coalition for several years, and it really laid the foundation of my career trajectory from that point on. My big project that I worked on while I was a policy intern with Scholarship Foundation was analyzing Bright Flight, which is Missouri's merit-based scholarship program. It's only based on ACT scores. Won't get into what that means, but if you guys know anything about standardized tests, you might have an idea of what kind of students are getting an award like that. So I spent a lot of time analyzing the data with that program. We created recommendations for the state to restructure that program, hosted a lobby day, and a lot of the work that we've done around Bright Flight, A+, Access Missouri. Carissa will talk about all of that a little bit more later, but a lot of that work still informs what's going on in Missouri higher education policy today. So coming from that type of environment, higher education policy and nonprofit management, into diversity and inclusion now, it's been a very interesting but way more streamlined transition than I thought it would be. A lot of those transferable skills that I learned as part of the advocacy program, my presentation skills, my analysis, research, all of those type of things inform what I do every day at Purina. So I spend a lot of time just helping with strategic planning, helping Purina understand how to better attract, recruit, retain once they're actually in there, and then promote people from different diverse backgrounds, whether that be people of color, people of different educational backgrounds, sexual orientation, gender identities, all different aspects of diversity. So I'm in a new environment, and it's really cool to see how I'm able to still apply all of those advocacy skills in the work that I'm doing now.
Okay, great. So how would you define advocacy?
I would define advocacy as first understanding who is not having access to resources or opportunities. I think that's the first level, is just that understanding of who it is, and then fighting for access to the powers that be for those people. So It looks different in different environments. For instance, at Purina, the people, like I was saying, those different groups I mentioned, underrepresented minorities, whether that be age, disability, all of these different aspects of diversity. But the people that we need to advocate for are potential employees and then also current employees. And the powers that be, that will be our leadership team. That will be the key decision makers, the people who are creating the policies, the people who are creating jobs every day at Purina. And then similarly with higher education policy, the people that we're fighting on behalf of are students, whether that be low-income students, first generation, undocumented. There are so many different students who don't have access to equal opportunity. So advocacy, I think, is, in that type of work, is pushing legislators, pushing stakeholders to make better decisions on behalf of all of these students who we know aren't getting the same access as some of their peers.
Okay. And then last question, you mentioned a program you were in when you were younger that taught you about advocacy. Can you talk about what it was like learning about advocacy and the whole thing at a younger age, and maybe how it, what it taught you at that age and how you were able to, well, you talked about how you were able to use it in your job, but can you talk about what it was like to kind of learn about advocacy at a younger age?
Mm-hmm. So the program, Carissa will talk to you about the details of the program, but I have a long history with Scholarship Foundation. So I started like as an advisor. Up until this point with Purina, I've always done college access type jobs. So I started as an advisor, and I quickly realized, not only with Scholarship Foundation, but with when I was working with school districts or other nonprofits, that direct practice is only one part of the work. Like, there's only so much impact you can make when you're working one-on-one with students. It's really important work, but without that other piece, without the policy, without being able to kind of inform the decisions that are affecting the bigger picture, it can only go so far. So I wasn't really interested in policy or advocacy. I didn't think I was. I was kind of intimidated by the topic, like just hearing policy as a like recent undergraduate, graduate and going into grad school. It was kind of intimidating. I just thought policy was something for politicians, like not your everyday person. But once we actually started doing the work, I understood like not only the importance of it, but that like we all have a role to play in it. There's so many different ways you can get involved in advocacy. It doesn't have to be on the ground, going to Jeff City, lobbying there. It can be, Carissa can speak to these even better than I can, but for instance, later today, Carissa works for another organization in addition to Scholarship Foundation, and they do a lot of policy work in the state of Missouri. I'm volunteering. They're doing like a text banking to reach out to people to encourage them to vote on August 4th. So many different ways you can get involved in this work. And I think going into advocacy and policy, I just had like a really one size fits all idea of what it meant. I thought it was going to be boring. I thought it was going to be like overly intimidating. Like, you have to know every little detail of every little policy. But what I found was I was able to really focus on what I was most passionate about. Our group, we had issues that we all covered, but then we also had individual issues and individual projects that we worked on. So it was a really cool way to understand just the broader educational landscape of higher education in Missouri, but it really allowed me to utilize my own experiences and use that to inform the work I was doing. The reason I even got interested in looking at Bright Flight was because growing up, I went to like my neighborhood. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, there are Black people in Omaha. Yes, there's like a hood in Omaha, and I grew up in that part of Omaha, went to our public schools up until 8th grade, and then got a scholarship and was able to go to a really academically challenging private school. And I just remember like how much that changed like my ability to perform on standardized tests. I remember talking to some of my peers who were just as intelligent as me, who were going to our neighborhood public school, talking to them in high school about like our ACT, SAT scores, and just noticing the disparities right there. So that work, or that understanding, as I went into policy, I took my own experience and was like, well, if this happened for me, if this is my experience, maybe other people have seen this. So it's really cool to just have that opportunity to intertwine the professional side and also the personal side. I think advocacy is a great way to intertwine your two worlds.
Wonderful explanation. Thank you. And so I know you have to hop off, so whenever you need to leave, we know you gotta go. But thank you for the explanation. That was amazing. And so now, Carissa, the same questions. Can you talk about, what advocacy is to you, how you do it in your everyday work, and just give us the tea?
For sure. Before I do that, would it be possible to have the other folks on the call introduce themselves? I know not everybody feels comfortable with cameras on. It would be nice if y'all would cut y'all cameras on so we're not just talking to each other, but it's a lot going on, so I understand if not everybody feels comfortable, but if folks can at least introduce themselves. To my understanding, there's a mix of student and staff, so if folks don't have pictures on their Zoom, I don't know who you all are, so it would just be nice. I know Brian by name, but for folks, and your hair looks great, by the way, hey, but for folks that I don't know, it's very hard for me to get on here and have a conversation sharing my life story looking at black boxes, so it'd be nice to at least know who I'm talking to.
Well, go ahead and introduce yourselves, y'all.
All right, so I'm Daniel Anderson. I'm 17. I go to North Technical High School.
I don't mind to call names if we're going to go in order or whatever would help speed it along, but I would actually like for everybody to introduce themselves.
I'm Jesse. I'm a coach here at Wiley.
Thank you.
I'm Lotus Marie. I'm a rising senior at McClure Senior High School.
Thank you.
And then we have Farron. I believe her camera or mic or something doesn't work all the time, so she chimes in via chat.
Gotcha. I do actually. Oh, I did see Farron. Thank you, Farron. Cool. Then with that, can you remind me what the first question was?
Yes. What is advocacy to you? How would you define it?
For sure. So I would define, I don't think there's a person on this call who's not advocated in some way, either for themselves or for someone else, right? And I tell people like my first advocacy gig was like being a big sister to like a lot of kids, right? And so whether you're like advocating to your parents on behalf of your younger siblings or like advocating to them to like, shut up and sit down, all of that. And so like very early active experiences with advocating for folks. And similarly to Amber, I still do not consider myself a policy person. I am a people person who is an organizer, who understands that I have to understand policy and able to get the stuff that I want from my folks. And so that is how I approach all of my work, which is why it was important for me to know who I'm talking to, because the work that I do is centered on the people. especially right now when times are really, really difficult. The people, the students in particular, are the thing that keeps me rooted and able to continue to do the work that I do, because it is hard work, especially as a Black person, especially as a Black woman, especially as a Black woman who is 29 years old. I'm oftentimes the youngest person in spaces by 20 years. And so people are important to me. That's why I do the work. That's what advocacy means to me. It means going to bat for folks, with folks, or for folks who aren't able to. And so that's what it looks like. That's what my job is every day. That's what my life has been, but that's what my jobs are. So as Amber mentioned, I do a couple of different things. Primarily, the job that I spend the most time on is as the advocacy director for the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis, where I've been now full time. It was 5 years on the 1st of this month, and so. You know, in 2015, I graduated. Thank you. I graduated from grad school. And then 2 weeks later, I began leading a program, as Amber mentioned, that we were both interns in. And so, like, even that transition from student, you know, intern to full-time professional, at the beginning of my career, my job was called manager of advocacy and policy research, because the Scholarship Foundation likes really long job titles. But that transition from education policy intern to manager of policy and advocacy in and of itself, and then manager to director in and of itself, is a journey that has lots of self-advocacy involved. And so whether that's like advocating to white folks who can't take me seriously because I'm Black, or advocating to older folks who can't take me seriously because I'm younger, and all of the things in between. And so that's a bit of personal advocacy, but professionally, I work to mostly orient and engage young folks in this advocacy thing. Like, what is it, right? Like, outside of student government, or like even from high school, stuff like that, like policy and advocacy, it just doesn't occur to a lot of folks as a profession, because that's not what we see most of the time, right? And so I train young folks on how to talk to people who are powerful folks, right? So whether that's politicians in Jeff City or in DC, whether that's folks at high schools, folks in charge of colleges. So what does that look like? What are the issues that we don't like, right? So like, what do we want to change? That's the most important thing. So what is the thing that we're going to be advocating about? Who are the people, right? So a lot of times folks are mad about things, which is great, because that's usually how people get involved, is being pissed off about something, but like don't actually know who the target is. So like, for example, if I'm mad about something that's happening on my college, right, the first place to go probably actually is not the president of the college, because usually those people at the top don't actually know what's really going on. And so like making sure folks know who their target is. So how do we understand how higher ed works, so we know who to go to when we want to change something? How to talk about the things. So like, what are the words? What are the issues? Amber talked about data analysis, right? Like, data is the key to most things, but not everybody wants to just sit up and analyze data. Not everybody actually can do that. I cannot do that, which is why Amber and I work so well. That is not my thing. Right. Like, and I'm clear on who I am and what skills I bring, as well as Amber. Like, she's clear on the fact that she likes to do that, and then wants to, and then can analyze data actually with the lens towards justice, not to just know the stats, because we all know the stats, right? Like, we hear stats about young people, about Black people, about women, about gay folks, about trans folks all day. To know the stats just doesn't mean much. It's about what you do with that. That is important. So I teach young people how to do that, how to take that information and move it. And then we pay people for that. So that's like one of the best parts about my job, is being able to put real money into the hands of young folks who ain't got none, right? So like, that's important. To actually pay people for their brilliance is really, really important. And so let me think. Yeah, so I think that I don't want to talk too much, but I think if I had to say what advocacy was to me, it's just that process of like putting yourself on the line for something you believe in, or for someone that you believe in.
I love that. Now you could have kept talking. I was all into it. You brought up a lot of great points. So I think the first thing I want to ask is, what is this program you're doing with young people? How can our students get involved? Because I know I have a couple of young activists. I know Lotus is one. I could just see her being a politician. So what is this program, and can you tell us more about how our students can get involved?
Totally. So at the foundation, we run essentially 2 different programs to engage folks in this work. And the first one is a set of internships. And so when Amber and I were coming up, it was just one program. It was the education policy internship. And then we did that. We came there and we did a thing, which was great. Like, it was an incredible program, produced incredible people, like, and we're all still, folks from those first few classes are all still connected to each other and also to the work in one way or another, which is incredible. That's like one of the biggest benefits of the program. So it's an internship program, but now it is a fellowship program because folks are working a little bit more, doing some more in-depth work and getting paid more. And so basically right now, I run a set of fellowship programs that aim to involve folks in either state, federal, or institutional policy, depending on, you know, their flavor, what they're most interested in. And folks usually work from October to about July, doing everything from meeting with legislators to researching policy, writing articles for papers, helping us do our social media. I'll explain that here in a second. Helping us reach other students and really owning the work. So like, these folks are helping build agendas. They're deciding like what policies we want to work on. And all of that. So like, big, important work. And folks can earn up to $6,000 from October to, it'll probably go to like mid-May this year, because granted, everything is online, because our offices are closed indefinitely. So we're trying to figure out like, what does advocacy look like when you can't meet people in person? Folks in Jeff City are hella irresponsible. So like, I'm not going to send people to Jefferson City during the COVID-19 pandemic because I can't count on them to wash their hands. So like, so then what does it look like when we still need to reach these folks? Because again, we're in a time of crisis, higher ed crisis, and then general crisis, and then state sanctioned violence on Black folks all day, every day, all the time. So like, we're in a big period of crisis, and we still got to meet these folks. We just may not be able to meet these folks in person. So like, I say all that to say a lot of information about our program, and it's really squishy right now because, as I said, it's rooted in people, which means like in person, building relationships, hanging out, bonding, like all of that is important to advocacy, because advocacy isn't something you can do by yourself. So like, being in community with people is really important to the way I practice as a person, but literally to winning. Like, there's never been a campaign that was ever won by one person acting by themselves, right? So that's a big piece. And then the second piece, which Amber mentioned earlier, it used to be called the Active Advocacy Coalition, or the AAC. It is now called the League of Student Advocates. Like, we superheroes. So now it's called the League. But it is a statewide network of students. So any coalition that you've ever been a part of, it runs really similar, right? And so these are folks who are like, I'm down, like, I want to show up. If y'all are going to Jeff City, you know, bring me, but I can't necessarily do a full year internship, or I don't live in St. Louis, or just whatever reason that they just want to do, you know, advocacy days. They'll come to meetings with legislators. We have an annual conference every year where we bring together about 100 students from every campus in Missouri, and a couple over in Illinois as well, to get together for 2 days. Brian's been to that event, I think, every year, perhaps except for one. And lots of Alexis, that's how I really met Alexis, is through what was the AAC when she was a student at Mo State. And really, I mean, I've met most people that I hire, I met through the LSA. Like, it just is a good way to bring students into the fold and really get folks engaged. And so anytime, and again, we pay folks. So like, if folks are trying to get y'all to work for free, I really challenge y'all to not do that. Because again, that is a labor, like going to Jefferson City, bearing through 10, 15, 20 meetings with folks. That's work. And so anytime folks come out with us and support for a 1-day event, they receive a stipend of $100. We've had folks go with us to DC that gets like bigger stipends because you're like leaving. And anytime folks have to request off work, like you missing work. So why would we not make up for that when I know I care mostly about low income folks, about Black folks, brown folks, immigrants who can't afford to miss work. So like if I'm asking you to miss work to like help us build a better world, you should be getting paid for that. I'm getting paid when I go up to Jeff City, so why wouldn't you? And so because it's it is work. And so those are the two sort of different programs, and everybody at Wyman has my contact info. So like if you're a student in Missouri, especially if I think you all are still in high school, so this wouldn't apply. But when you all go to college, then definitely, especially for those of you who will be graduating this year, do keep in touch. And everybody has my contact info, or even just now as you're thinking, like, the world is really political right now. So like people are just like wheels are turning. So if you have thoughts or questions, I'm very easy to reach. In addition to that, to my work with the foundation, as Amber mentioned, I work with a local grassroots org called Action St. Louis that is deeply political working. Like we're about to close a jail. So if you've ever heard of like the workhouse closing, like Action St. Louis is one of the lead organizers behind closing that jail. And so like I'm a very political person. So if people have any questions about anything related to pretty much anything, the only thing I'm not as well versed in is like environmental issues or like, things of that nature. But most issues I can probably point you to a person or org to tap into.
Wonderful. I love that. Can you drop your email in the chat so
Yes.
I can save it and send it to everyone after the call? Okay, so you made a great point about the program you had. I wanted to know if you could give an example of a policy. So I know Amber mentioned it and you mentioned it kind of when you were younger. You didn't know what policy is. I barely understand what policy looks like. So could you give an example of what a policy is and maybe one you worked on with the students in your organization and kind of what kind of work y'all did and maybe like the process of it, because I would just love to know, child.
Totally. So one of the biggest issues that we work on at the Scholarship Foundation is this concept of need-based financial aid. And what that means is people fill out the FAFSA, which if you aren't familiar, you're gonna be familiar with it here shortly, depending on what year you're in, but the FAFSA is the form that you fill out to tell the federal government how much money your family has. They use that information. They say, okay, bet this is how much your family can afford to pay for college. For a lot of folks who I work with, their families are not able to contribute to their college degree. Same with mine. Like they had lots to give me. It just wasn't money, right? Like they could give me support. They give me some home cooked meals. They can come visit, but we didn't have the money to go to college. And so therefore need-based aid is what I relied on, and debt. But we're trying to steer folks away from debt. And so need-based aid is what you rely on. And federally, that's called the Pell Grant. And in the state of Missouri, that's called Access Missouri. And so need-based financial aid, like most things for people who don't have a lot of wealth, is never funded right. Okay, so that means there are thousands and thousands and thousands of students with need and just a little bit of money to go around. So we're always asking the state government as well as the federal government to increase the Pell Grant or the Access Missouri grant. And so the reason why we chose that as a priority is because, again, the majority of the students that I know that we work with that require that support require need-based aid to go to college. Like that's the only way we can go, is if that aid is there. Without it, folks can't go. And if this is unfamiliar to folks, let me know. If you feel what I'm saying, let me get a hand clap, an amen, like just so I can make sure it's landing. And if you have questions, there's background questions about the issue, just let me know, pop them in the chat or whatever if I'm not explaining it thoroughly. But that's the 1,000-foot view of the issue. And so how you take that issue, it's a big issue. It lives on the federal level, state level, and at institutions as well, because institutions can decide who they want to give money to, and they do decide. It just ain't folks who are low income, right? And so like we're pressing all of those folks. And so with any campaign that we do, it starts off again in that research, right? Because we want to make sure, like I know my individual experience as a student struggling to pay for college, so do my interns, so does my boss, like people, they know, right? But we need to do the research to make sure we can demonstrate, because even though we know, but to demonstrate that this is a global issue. Like it's not just Carissa who can't afford college, right? Like this is all students like Carissa, or most students like Carissa, right? So we do the research, we make sure we have our facts and figures, etc. We always apply everything we do a lens of racial equity. And what that means is this policy impacting races differently? Why is that? And then how can we articulate that? Because again, with the data, it's not enough to just say, oh, you know, well, 70% of students in Missouri get financial aid. That's cool. But like, if you look at that, that will tell you that, you know, okay, out of that 70%, only 5% of those folks are Black then, and that's a problem, right? So like, that's the thing about the data and the understanding, because everyone will say that. Look at your college, they'll say, or your high school even, they'll say, you know, oh, we have 90% graduation rate. Well, if you interrogate that graduation rate a little bit more, you'll see that 90% is mostly made up of the same type of person. And that applies to any statistic that you see anywhere, pretty much. That's the thing about stats. When we do our lesson on data and statistics, you can find a stat that'll prove anything you want to prove, and you will also find a stat that will disprove that same thing, right? Because stats are just numbers. They have to be interrogated, they have to be fleshed out. Like, we want to get into all of that, and especially this day when folks then got bit by the justice bug, and now everybody wants to talk about race and racism and systems and institutions, right? So like, how can we continue to challenge folks to look more deeply and not just say, oh, we're doing all right because of the 70%? Because who is that 70%? And 70% ain't enough to me when it's 100% of people out here. So like, that's also a thing. So even when like we're making asks of legislators to increase stuff, it's like, oh, thanks. And now you can do some more. Like, it's never enough for me. It's never enough for my folks. Like, we don't want no crumbs. We don't want no leftovers. We don't want no afterthoughts. Like, we built all of this, and therefore, like, yeah. So, you know, it's been a week for me. So let me know if y'all are picking up what I'm putting down. But truly, a lot of my work has come to live in anti-racism work, because racism lives in all of our systems. And so we got to be equipped to talk about that with the people who make the system. So like, we got to talk to legislators about racism, like in their role in perpetuating and upholding it. And colleges too. We think of colleges as like these big liberal places, but like, colleges racist as hell. And so how can we call folks out on that and not just be like, oh, y'all racist because y'all said a racist thing. Y'all are racist because look at the last 25 years of y'all's data. Look at what y'all are doing with all of y'all's money. Look at how many Black, brown, poor folks who start here but don't graduate. Like those are the questions that we're equipping young folks to be able to ask of the places that they pay to learn. And so I think that's what the policy, like that's what the campaign sort of roadmap looks like. Like, does it live in the data? Can we then disaggregate that data to really prove how marginalized groups, all marginalized groups, are differently impacted by policies? Can we take that information and unashamedly speak it to the folks who are making those decisions? And then can we stand up for our people, right? Like, we go up there, we make asks, it don't usually go how we like, right? So like, but that doesn't mean we don't go back. So like, we got to keep checking in on each other, keep building, keep checking in on those legislators, the ones who are our friends and the ones who are our declared enemies. We got to check in with them on them all, and continue to push. That's the biggest thing. Like I said, I've done this job. This is my 5th year in this job, and we've had some wins, some small wins, yes, but we have not seen sweeping policy shifts. And when I talk to folks who've been in the field 2 or 3 times as long as me, they would tell you the same. And so again, when I say like this is long-term hard work that you got to be invested in it. Like if I didn't care about young people, I could go off and work any job. I could be hired by a lobbying firm tomorrow and make 3 times what I make today and be a lot less stressed and have a lot less gray hair. But like, I'm committed to the folks, and that's what's most important.
Thank you for the answer. That was great. Snaps, yes, claps all around. We're gonna have some time for questions, but before that, I wanted to do a little activity. So I know you talked about kind of the work you do with students. And so I wanted to see if we can kind of do like a live activity. So you mentioned how you choose an issue and then you kind of go from there and figure it out. So I kind of want to do that kind of activity. So everybody, we're going to do a little activity, Lotus, Farron, Daniel, and Malachi. So you can turn your cameras on, I turn a mic on, and let's talk through what advocacy would look like. So let's talk about an issue and kind of see where we can go from there. So with something like Carissa mentioned that makes you angry right now, that has you looking at things, has you questioning some things, what's an issue we can talk about and figure out how we can advocate for that issue. So let's figure it out. Let's talk. I know you have them. The violent rioting in big cities. Okay. What else? Lotus, do you have anything to add? Malachi, Daniel? Okay, I will take that as a no. So, okay, we have an issue, the violent rioting in big cities. So, Carissa, what would that look like if we talked about policies and advocating? How would we advocate that? What would that work look like?
Totally. This was from Farron. So I think I need a little bit more info on what you mean by that. Like which riots, perhaps, when did they happen, why, and then perhaps that may make it easier for us to then think through how to solve it.
Yeah. So Farron, can you give us a little more context? I'm assuming she's typing. Yep. Can you see her comment? She said the violent rioting in big cities, just in general. I don't know.
Oh, gotcha.
Specifics. Yeah.
For sure. So then with this issue, my advice would be to look at what the root of the issue is. I don't think that rioting is perhaps a policy issue. There were some lapses in some policies that led to people feeling like they needed to riot, that perhaps can be interrogated, but rioting itself isn't a policy issue or a system. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then with most issues, start at like understanding what the root is, right? So even when I mentioned about need-based aid, like looking at the root, what is need-based aid? Why isn't there enough? And then why do people need it? Similarly with rioting, right? What is a riot? Okay, like talk about that, because there has been lots of misuses of the word. In some cases, there are true riots, but in most cases, there are not. Then look at why those folks are rioting. So what prompted folks to take to the street? Normally, especially during a global health pandemic that is spread by breathing, folks aren't quick to come out to the streets. And so in this case, then I would interrogate what made folks start to riot. which if they are the riots of recently, those folks were rioting because folks were murdered in cold blood by people charged with the protection of the folks that were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when you interrogate that, then you'll find lots of lapses in policy, whether that was intended, a lot of which is intended, but some of which is unintended. Excuse me, there's like a thing on my camera. So that'd be my suggestion. Thinking about then if this is an outcome here that we have, the riots are an outcome, right? And so there are also lots of other outcomes that we can interrogate. So similarly to deed-based aid, the outcome there was folks don't have enough money to go to college.
Right.
And then when you trace that back, we got to the policy issue of folks choosing not to put funding in deed-based aid. And so if you trace back people rioting, whether if that rioting is what you deem violent or not, you can trace that back to some pretty clear, deeper systemic issues.
Yes.
Which is the best way to move anything forward, is to look at the root of it.
Looking at the root. Great explanation. Thank you for that activity. Great. Okay, Farron got it. She said thank you. Okay, cool. So now we'll leave some time for questions for Carissa. And if you all had any questions for Amber, she left her email and I'll email it all to you after this call. So if you have any questions, now is the time for any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. So let's engage in conversation.
Okay, I don't really know what to say, but everybody's being quiet, so I just felt like I should say something. I mean, I don't know what to say really. It was an awkward silence, and I'm very good at filling those. But a lot of people say I should be a politician, especially my dad. He wants me to be a politician really bad, which I don't think I have the heart for it.
Say more about what kind of heart you think you have to have.
I think you have to be someone who is compassionate, but then also can see like the bigger picture. And even though I can't see like the big picture, I'm very bad at like when people are yelling at me, I have a really hard time not crying. And I feel like someone should be able to like stand in front of a bunch of people and be able to get words out without sobbing.
Yeah, I don't think so. I want to challenge you on that, particularly because that's human, right? And so I understand it can be strange or it can feel embarrassing, right? But I had an intern, she was my intern, I think, for like 2, maybe even 3 years. And every time we would talk, she would cry, literally, because the issues are personal. And she would cry in just meetings. Like we met bi-weekly and we were doing trainings and just like having what somebody might see as like a normal conversation, but for her was like very heavy, and she would cry. And we brought in a consultant one time who's a communications expert, and so the intern had shared with her literally what you said. Like, I feel like I'm not as strong, or like I'm not getting my point across if I cry. And that consultant basically told her, like, sis, it's nothing you can do about crying, because that's who you are. This thing is like, this your family that you're talking about. Like, this is your life. And so if you get upset about it, especially if somebody's berating you, the natural response to somebody yelling at you is to get upset, right? And so like what she told us to do was say, like, when you start crying, like, say, I'm not apologizing for this, but I want to acknowledge that I'm crying because this is very important to me. And in order for you to understand what I'm trying to say, I want to communicate to you why I'm crying, but I don't want to apologize for it because I want you to know that this is important to me. And I think to go back to the issue about rioting, I think people have a similar thoughts about protests. Protests are not peaceful events. That goes against the very nature of a protest, right? Especially not a riot. That's a whole, like, those things are different. Like, I want to say that a protest and a riot is different. I've been involved in both. I've been tear gassed at both. Like, I've been tear gassed standing still quiet as a mouse on the sidewalk. Like, and I've still been tear gassed, and I've been tear gassed shouting and hollering at police. And so, like, the same is true for politicians. I've had politicians cuss me. I've had politicians shout at me during hearings. I've had people say things about my body, like and those things do happen. And so I agree that will not ever run for any open office, but it is not because of my emotions, it's because of theirs. And so, like, just hold that. Like, if you decide not to run, they don't actually deserve us as politicians is usually my response when someone asks me to run. And so, like, I just want to make that clear. Like, if that's your choice, don't run, right? But, like, don't let your emotions be the thing that stops you, because the folks who do not have emotions, those are the ones that are problematic. Like, not the folks who effortlessly display emotions. That's not a problem.
And I would add that the fact that you have emotions shows that you have compassion. So that actually shows that you have.
What we need.
If you cry about things, this is heavy stuff. Whenever you have to actually speak up for other people, it's pretty heavy. And so the fact that you cry, that's a normal response, and that's healthy. So tears are healthy.
Yeah, and some of the most effective legislators that I know a lot of politicians, like, by way of the jobs, right? I know a lot that I like, and I know some I don't like. Some are my actual friends, right? And so some of the most effective folks I know get up there and they holler, like, they shout, because sometimes that's the only way you get heard, is when you act the ass. Like, oh, okay, so you didn't want to hear me when I was sitting at my seat, raising my hand, asking to talk on the issue, right? But, like, now that I'm saying this and I'm emotional, people understand. And so I think there's just lots of different ways to be effective. And if you're talking about something that makes you cry, they just got to deal, because that thing that made you cry probably shouldn't have happened, right? Like, and that's the reality. So when my folks are in Jeff City talking about gun violence that plagues St. Louis where they live, they get emotional because they know people who've been murdered, like, and that's a problem. Yeah. When my folks are talking about immigration issues, they get emotional because they can know folks who've been deported, and that's a problem, like, and that's okay.
Yeah. In conclusion, emotions are okay. We love
use them. Again, like, that's what fuels me. Like, being pissed off is some of the best energy around. Like, and it don't run out, at least for me. Like, it don't run out. So, like, all I can do is tap into it. Like, the rage isn't gonna go away. Like, the sadness may not go away. So, like, tap into it, and just accept it.
I love that. Did you have another question or thought, Lotus, or anyone else that you wanted to share? Okay. Yeah, chew on that, Lotus. I think that's something to think about. And girl, if you want to run. If you don't. Okay, you can still make.
If you want to run, hit me up. Or if you want to keep thinking about it or talking about it, again, like I said, I work elections all the time, and I'm a deeply political person. And so if you just I can connect you with other women who are legislators, or whatever, or other folks who don't identify as men. I can connect you with them, if you think that may be helpful, just to ask them what their journey was like too.
Yeah. So now you got a resource, Lotus. Yay. Did anyone else have questions or comments or thoughts?
I have a quick comment / thought. Just wanted to, again, double down on emotion, just because, like, as Carissa said, like, it's very real. I think you can become your most authentic self, or you are your most authentic self when you can identify your emotions, you can identify your thoughts, your feelings. And I'll just use myself as an example. Many people may not know this, but I know Alexandria know this because you was in the car. Well, I was in the car when this happened, but just a couple weeks ago, I was triggered because there was couple of police officers looking for somebody that was not in my building that I live in. And because I had a situation with police brutality, it created a traumatic experience for me. Literally, I went into survival mode, and I started crying. I started calling people because I thought in that moment that I could potentially lose my life again, right? So even after that, being able to name the emotions of, like, I was scared, I was fearful for my life. it didn't diminish who I was,
Right.
but it gave me more power over the situation, and that I can overcome. And that regardless of what people can say about me, I've been talked about around like emotion management, or you need no, you need to be more in tune with your emotions.
Yep.
It's because that I'm in tune with my emotions that I'm able to thrive, and I can use that to my benefit versus allowing people to use you and use your emotions to get what they want. So just wanted to double down on that. Being true to your emotions and being true to your causes is what I think is really important. And I can see that obviously drives Carissa, it drives me. And yeah, just wanted to double down on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was great. We love emotions here at Wyman at the Scholarship Competition, okay? We love emotions.
Here I am being teary-eyed just for talking.
Yes. So, well, yeah, clearly advocacy is emotional work. So, hello.
Yeah.
I want to thank Carissa and Amber. She had to hop off for being on the call. This was really great. I hope each of you were able to grasp something from the call. I know I learned a lot. I loved it, Carissa. I could hear you talk all day, girl. Thank you for teaching and sharing.
Of course.
This is the last call of the summer. Tomorrow will be the last day. So continue to engage in conversation with the folks in your homes. I'm excited to see what you all learn tomorrow. And we're giving out community service hours tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to seeing those before and after pictures of what y'all have cleaned up in your house. And then don't forget, next week, and was it August 3rd, is the MSU on-site admissions event. So I believe all of you on here are seniors now. So if you plan on doing that, make sure you apply and send that information over to Brian. And if we don't have any more thoughts, comments, or concerns, this will conclude this call.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us, and it's been nice chatting with you. I left my email in the chat. So again, if folks have other thoughts or questions, later today or after this, always just hit me up. And it was nice to see y'all again too.
Good to see you too. And everybody, I'll send their contact information to you after this call. Okay.
Cool. All right then. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.